Laos is the mountain crossroads of Southeast Asia. The Pathet Lao holds one side of the country. From its area, entire villages are driven into free Laos. Sam Thong is a refugee center, the headquarters of Pop Buell. In these mountains, Buell works for the United States Agency for International Development, giving relief to refugees, resettling them in clusters of villages around Sam Thong, and helping mountain people develop a modern way of life. Edgar Buell is one of many Americans doing similar work elsewhere. In this primitive farm technology, the mountain tribes normally clear brush, plant rice and corn until the land wears out, then move. In war, they move more often and are always starting over. How does a successful farmer from the most technologically advanced country in the world, 52 years old, money in the bank, find himself in the village of Sam Thong? Pop Buell.
It all leads back to my wife dying. We'd seemingly accomplished what most people thinks about, especially a farmer in life, getting a farm and get it paid for and slowing down in life, and that's what we'd accomplished. After she died, both of my children grew up. My son had been going to college to Purdue, and all of a sudden he decided that he was going to be a farmer like his granddad and dad was. So I decided maybe I could do something else. Thought maybe I could go somewhere in the world and just do good for people somewhere, and it didn't make much difference where. And I applied to International Voluntary Service, and I was sent to Laos.
The International Voluntary Service is a forerunner of the Peace Corps. Buell first works with these people, the Mayo tribesmen, in 1960. He comes with agricultural advice, finds the people need everything. He tries to bring it to them. Health services, schools, clothing, goes into the villages, learns the language. In 1962, he becomes an area coordinator for the Agency for International Development, USAID. Pop Buell with CBS News correspondent Bernard Kalb.
Pop, how old is Sam Thong?
Sam Thong is approximately 3 years old. It is a complete refugee village. 3 years ago, when I came in here, there was nothing, not even a building at Sam Thong. At that time, we had about 3,600 people, and as you can see today, we have got about 10 to 1,100 people. The rest have all been resettled and have become self-sufficient. At that time, USAID was furnishing all the rice for these people. Now, all the rice we're having to furnish at Sam Thong is for a new village over here of about 150 Lao people who have just come out of communist territory, plus our hospitals and for our school children. The population here is about 90% Mayo tribes people, and the rest are Laotians out of the Plain de Jar area.
The plane Buell awaits is flown by the pilots of Air America, a private contractor to the State Department.
The airplanes that flies in here is probably one of the most important things in northern Laos fighting communists. If there is nothing carried in an airplane up here, if there is no rice carried in it, no personnel or nothing, and if the communist sees this plane flying over, it probably has more effect on them than any other thing up here in this country. Plus, if it was not for your drop planes that come over to drop rice, the people couldn't be fed. Your little helios that comes in here each day carries the drugs from village to village, which in the long run turns out to save many, many lives.
Mayo children are not used to being hungry. Their parents are good farmers, Buell says. But even in normal times, disease kills many children, and adults can expect to live only 30 years. Current supplies, rice, clothing, tools, medicines, come largely through U.S. aid, go to the Laotian government, which passes them on to workers like Buell for distribution. And he has spent thousands of dollars of his own savings from his farm in Indiana on the mail. Sam Thong is a base for Buell. He also works in outlying villages surrounded by the Pathet Lao, with guerrilla warfare a daily danger. Buell jeeps in, walks in, or flies in. There are now about 100 landing strips in the mountains. The planes get shot at and hit. Buell has had a jeep shot out from under him. He has been a refugee himself more than once, and at one time the communists were reported to have a price of $25,000 on his head. The planes also carry the wounded and the sick. Villagers who do not submit to the communists must flee or fight. The Mayo are strong fighters, but Buell says two things the communists care nothing about: time and lives. In the beginning, he learned from a nurse how to give drugs, perform amputations, deliver babies. Then he promised villagers if they would build a clinic or a school, he would see that it got supplies and help. That's what the other side does, Buell says. Dr. Charles Weldon is public health chief of the USAID mission in Laos.
Up until about 3.5 years ago, the only medical tradition that they had was based on superstition, and it's only been about in the last 3.5 years that Pop has started to develop these rather crude dispensaries and hospital facilities, and to train people from the mountains to give the medical care. We unfortunately have a very heavy load of war wounded. Probably at least half of the patients are people who've been injured by different types of war accidents. The other half of the patients are usually suffering from malnutrition, malaria, respiratory diseases, and different types of intestinal disorders.
The staff are young men and women from the villages brought to Sam Thong for training. They learn by seeing and doing. Then they go back to their isolated villages to be the resident medical workers, health service, ward nurses. "4 years ago, seeing how the communists worked before me," Pop Buell says, "I decided to build a school." He has since seen many built by the villagers, from rough forest timbers, from bamboo and flattened oil drums. Thousands of Mayo and Laotian children are tasting education for the first time.
Well, I feel we're making a great advancement in education in these mountains. 3.5 years ago, we had no schools. Today, we have many, and as you can see here, the advancement taking place. We had to get teachers out of Vientiane and build better schools for the advancement of these children.
Les cours d'eau qui n'appartiennent pas au bassin du Mekong coulent vers l'est. Ce sont les animaux anaden, then 5 frontière.
Pop, as you've seen this program unfold in the past 3.5 years, what kind of effect has it had on you?
I think you all probably know that. When I went back to the United States, before I went back, there probably was a little question on my mind whether I was coming back or not. It's had enough effect on me that I'm sure if when USAID decides that they don't want me to work for them anymore, that I would come back and work for the people themselves.
In Laos, Edgar Buell's nickname has nothing to do with his age. Pop means gift from above in Mayo. Tan is Mr. He is Mr. Gift from Above.
These people comes out of the Plain de Jara area, which is well known by now. They have been 2 years trying to get out. In so doing, they've lost about 1/3 of their population, either by sickness or by dying, or by trouble with the communists. They got in here about 4 months ago. And as you can see, it's becoming an established village. Up until 2 months ago, when I come from home leave, I didn't know them. But seemingly, they had heard somewhere across the mountain there that there was somebody over here that would not only be willing to accept them and would help care for them. And as soon as I arrived, after the second night, these people had already made preparations for a bossy, which we call a party, which you can guess was a very simple party that assured me that they had already had accepted me.
They knew you by your name, Tom Pop.
That is right. They knew me before they got here. And I had never met none of these people before in my life.
What's happening here, Pop?
You can see here an improvement that is taking place, and a very necessary improvement. For generations, these people with their livestock have been inbreeding. And you can see by looking at this pig what we have got to work with. You can see that the belly nearly touches the ground. There is no clasp to the body whatsoever. We have put in this village a male hog that I got out of Saigon, that Sam Saigon gave me. And here you can see the results of the first pigs. And notice the difference, how straight they are. Anybody that knows anything about pigs will have to say that there is some pretty good pigs from one cross breeding with a mother of that type. These pigs, in turn, it is understood that the owner will not keep, but he will pass on to other villages.